Well, readers, 2024 is on the way out. Over the past 10 months or so, we've gotten a chance to read some good books, some really good books, and had a couple of disappointments. But all in all, 2024 was a really good year in reading. But now it's time to plan our 2025 TBR. Here's a peek at some of the stuff that we're going to be reading over the course of the next year. It includes some new works by some legendary authors, as well as some deep dives into some of the best that horror, sci-fi, and fantasy has to offer. So please join the conversation. Hey everybody, 2024 coming to a close, so that means it's time to map out our 2025 TBR list. There's a lot of really good science fiction, horror, and fantasy, as well as a couple nonfiction books that I'm really looking forward to in the coming year. Now, some of these books are going to be newly published in 2025. There are some recently published books I've been meaning to get to, but I didn't get to in 2024. And then there's some classics I've just been meaning to get to for the longest time that I hope to knock out in 2025 as well. But some of the books on this list have been recommended by you in comments throughout the year, so I really appreciate that. Now, this list that we're going to go over is a guide. It's not going to be totally set in stone, and the reason for that's obvious. I mean, sometimes life happens, you can't finish everything that you set out to read, but also because I want to give myself the flexibility to adjust to newfound books that are coming out that I didn't know were out there, and to suggestions from you all as we go through the year. So at the end of 2025, we'll do a recap and see how many of these books we actually got to read. Let's start with science fiction. There's a big event for sci-fi readers in 2025, at least if you're into military science fiction, which I believe I've mentioned is one of my favorite, if not my very favorite subgenre. But John Scalzi is going to be releasing the latest Old Man's War book installment in 2025. It doesn't have a title yet, but I'm all over that. So what that means is I've got to finish reading the Old Man's War series. I haven't gotten to all of them. So if you've read the series, you know that it starts with Old Man's War, goes to Ghost Brigade, The Last Colony, Zoe's Tale, The Human Division, and The End of All Things. And then this newest installment will be coming out, I want to say in the second half of the year. September, I believe, is when it's coming out. So that means I've got some reading to finish up those books. So I'm really, really excited about that. Now, on top of that, I've got some ground to make up. I need to continue reading the Child Cycle series, which started off with Dorsai. I'm going to need to go to Honor Harrington. I've had some conversations with a couple of you folks about this because I was a little dissuaded with how Honor Harrington on Basilisk Station started off. It wasn't really grabbing my attention, but I'm going to continue with that because Weber seems to be a solid writer, and I know it's just going to get better. So I want to continue with that. And then the Lost Fleet series by Jack Campbell. I was really impressed with Dauntless, so I'm looking forward to continuing that series as well. Having said all that, I'm looking for some other gems out there. So if you have any knowledge of any good sci-fi books out there, either new or older, that we haven't talked about here, please drop them in the comments. I would love to add some more sci-fi to the list. Let's talk horror now. 2025 has got a couple of exciting books coming out. Both Stephen King and his son Joe Hill have books coming out in 2025. You have King Sorrow by Joe Hill, and I think October of 25 is Never Flinch by Stephen King. In 2024, Stephen King had published You Like It Darker, which I thoroughly enjoyed and highly recommend. So I'm looking forward to Never Flinch in 2025. So those two horror books I'm really excited about, but I've also got some older things that I'm working on. The very first video we're going to release in 2025 is going to be the best Gothic horror books out there. And it's going to kick off with The Castle of Otranto, which I have not yet read, but is considered to be the very first Gothic horror book published in 1764. So that's going to be pretty cool. But I'm also halfway through about this really exciting book that I had never heard of until recently called Mexican Gothic. That's something that I actually just started, so I'm kind of cheating, but I want to get that all read and reviewed in time for our first video. And so that, plus a lot of classic Gothic horror books, is going to be our very first video. So I'm looking forward to 2025. In addition to those, a couple of months ago on Blue Sky, which has got a thread called Book Sky, and on Threads, which has got Book Threads, I asked the reading community out there for some suggestions on horror, fantasy, and sci-fi that maybe aren't as popular or as well known as, your Stephen King and your Joe Hill type books. And I got a lot of interesting recommendations. And from that conversation, I decided to add The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. Apparently, Jones is a Native American author, and he's written a number of horror books that have been very well received. And so The Only Good Indians has been added to my TBR, and I plan on reading that and adding that to our reviews of the best horror books later on down the month. So looking forward to that as well. Having said all that, again, if you know of any good horror books that maybe we haven't covered yet and we haven't talked about, please drop them in the comments. I know that there are a number of, remember, this is just a guide, and I'm not covering everything, so there are a number of other books that you all have suggested that I'm going to try to follow up on as well. Now let's talk fantasy. I confessed in a recent video that over the years I had neglected reading fantasy authors because I was simply too loyal, overly loyal to Tolkien and Robert E. Howard and Michael Moorcock and those authors. So I've been trying to make up for lost time over the last couple of months. So with that said, I've started the Mistborn series, I've started the Gentleman Bastard series, and I'm going to continue with that. I've got The Way of Kings, so the Stormlight Archive, which I haven't started yet. I will be in 2025. Matter of fact, I'm going to do a video sometime in 2025 on the best military fantasy books out there, and The Way of Kings, from what I understand, should be in that kind of subgenre. So we'll be tackling that. And although I was a little disappointed in The Name of the Wind, I'm going to continue with the Kingkiller Chronicles as well, because again, even though it didn't excite me, I was just impressed by how beautifully written the book was, and how talented of a writer Patrick Rothfuss is. So I'm going to continue with that and give the next book in the series a try. But again, based off these conversations I had on Threads and on Blue Sky, I've got some recommendations of some lesser known books, at least lesser known to me. Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, I'm going to add to my list. When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill, that's also on my list. And then something that's I wouldn't call him a less well-known author, but Joe Abercrombie has got The Devils coming out in May of 2025. And so that's going to be on my list as well. It's going to be a busy fantasy year, 2025. So looking forward to all those. And finally, a subgenre that I've never really been exposed to that I'm going to dive into early next year is the tech noir subgenre. And those, I don't know, I just got the bug. I was reading a couple of reviews, and I've added Titanium Noir by Nick Harkaway, Altered Carbon by Richard Morgan, and When Gravity Fails by George Alec Effinger. So for science fiction, I got a lot of stuff on my plate, and I'm really looking forward to that. But again, if you guys have any recommendations, please let me know. All right, well, guys, that's about summarize it. Really looking forward to 2025. What are you planning on reading? Did I miss anything good? Please let me know. We'll add it to the list and talk about it. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great day and a great new year.